as mentioned, I worked in the United States for a long time. Spent some time working for a firm in San Francisco called Roma Design Group. Spent a long time at Lend-Lease, about 10 years, and now I'm at Stockland. We are a large company. We do a multitude of projects, but some of the experience in the US, including base reuse work, working on Rouse Hill in Sydney for Lend-Lease, and Ford in the ACT, which was voted the most advantaged neighbourhood in Canberra, which when you think about Canberra neighbourhoods, there's some very advantaged neighbourhoods. Here's a new neighbourhood and it got that ranking, so I'm very proud of that. So Stockland, we have a very clear purpose. We also have a very clear vision of what we want to do as a company. We're not just a developer, we build great communities. And we believe that there is a better way to build places, and we put a lot of effort and time into that. We also do a lot of work from a sustainability point of view, and we seek recognition for that and back it up with what we do on the ground. So today I want to talk about, we're in sort of the retail and economic development part, but I wanted to talk a bit about what I think drives economic development and viability in retail. And that's livability, adaptability, and to make it work, placeability. First we'll jump into livability, and I'll give some context of livability. You need to actually be able to measure livability, and I'm going to tell a bit of a story about what we did at Stockland, in particular on the livability index we developed. First, livability is about fitting a place to live in, the most livable cities in the world, an environment or climate that is comfortable to be in. It's easier or bearable to live with. One would hope we can do better than that. But livability is a term that's used a lot, but I think it's not always understood. And so we did a lot of work a couple of years ago, and it's ongoing, to go out and ask our residents who have been in our communities for 4 or 5 years, what is it like to live in our communities and what could we be doing better? And this was based on 6 key areas. One was affordable living and questions about, what is it like to, what are the pressures on life living in a community? Second was economic prosperity. How are they performing in the world? Third was access and connectivity. How can I actually get about and are other communities doing what they need to do? Belonging and identity, which is a very challenging one, especially when we build a lot of new communities from scratch. You often actually don't have a lot of context to work with. Belonging and identity, we put a massive amount of effort in to try and make that happen quickly and early. This has now given us a tool by which we can start to test that and see how we're performing. Health and well-being and safety. And the last one is governance and engagement. Are we engaging with our community? And also, is the community actually getting natural leaders coming up and engaging broadly within their own new community that's been developed? So these themes were used. Then we used Maslow's hierarchy of needs to sort of set up a structure for the questions that were being asked. At the end of the day, initially people are looking for a place to live, but as you go up the hierarchy of needs, you get to a point where you feel like you've made it. A place that you're proud of and something that that performs well and gives you a great life, and that's a lot of what livability is about. Retail and economic development needs to perform actually at all those levels, and I think it's important to kind of keep that in the back of your mind. The survey itself, it took about 45, 50 questions. Took about an hour for people to fill in. Often they were helped by someone coming into their home to ask them the questions. We ranked the satisfaction on a 0 to 10 scale. And as we go into this year and early next year, we're actually going to an online tool so that people can do it more ad hoc. So we can actually be getting constant feedback on how places are performing, which I think is quite exciting because it's quite expensive to roll this out, but it's really, really powerful information. What came back is we've got different levels of importance for different elements within the index. Community design elements were seen as the most important, followed by the general house and land elements, community perceptions, then general house and land elements, personal circumstances, and interestingly enough, my home was seen as the least important part of livability. So it was all about what's outside of the home that people were responding to, which I think is very telling. That led to 5 priority elements that came out of it, popped out of it. And there was 36 key issues that were driven out of it. These are the top 5. Road safety was obviously very important, and I think we could be doing a lot better on, and it was seen as a big concern. Connection to the community, how people actually can get out connected, and socially and physically. I think socially, very importantly. The area has a strong identity, which is interesting because from a master plan community perspective, we put a lot of marketing capital into the identity, probably more so than any existing neighbourhood. But it was felt that that needed to be stronger and better, probably better about more genuine identity rather than marketing identity. Affordable housing, home options available, and then interestingly enough, larger, more premium lots available, which you kind of think, well, hang on, that doesn't really work. And I think the larger, more premium lots is as much about aspiration. It's about seeing that I can actually have a house that is of a scale that I can do what I want in. The reality is often people can do that in a much smaller property. It just needs to be well designed. And so, so that helps us sort of address a lot of, gives us sort of a brief to move on with. So from that, so now we've sort of measured the livability. We've got a sense of what are our hot button issues and what are the things we need to tackle. Then the second part, I think, is adaptability. And we're seeing this more and more in communities in our retail centres. But adaptability is about creating flexible places. And we've heard a bit about this morning. We've heard about pop-up bars and pop-up art galleries and converting laneways with temporary uses. I think that's brilliant. And that's a lot of what adaptability is about. And this has been driven by this desire and the tools coming out to allow individual creativity to not just be, I make something during the week and I sell it at my local market. I make something during the week and I sell it to someone in Canada. Because in Etsy, I can do that. And so it's these tools that suddenly empower a whole different level of economy, but often still need some kind of local roots. And sometimes those local roots can't even be satisfied by a market. They need to be satisfied by other ways. An example with Etsy, and I'll mention Renu Australia in a little bit, but we worked with Renu Australia to fill some space in one of our shopping centres in Victoria. We wanted to put them in on a short-term 1-month lease. We actually found the craftsperson through Etsy as a local Etsy producer, and that we basically built them a store for a month to test out how would they go as a retailer. Low risk for them, low risk for us as a company, great opportunity for them to sort of try something that they could never have afforded to do otherwise. So it's that creativity that is making a massive difference to how people function today and the desire of what people want to do. The movie Chef, I don't know if any of you have seen it, it's actually out at the moment. It's a really interesting story because there's a whole bunch of subtext about a father meeting his, getting to know his son again. But what it's really about is here's a person who's a brilliant chef. He works in a really nice restaurant, but he's got no creative energy because he has to deliver the menu every night. He decides to stuff it. He gets actually fired. He goes and gets a food truck, and he can cook what he wants to cook. And it's about his individual creativity. And actually, in this movie is also about social media. It's about how social media drove his success. And I think it's a very timely story because this is happening already, but I think it's going to happen more and more. And I would recommend you go and see this movie and see it from that light, from that perspective. The creative passion that people bring to what they do and they get excited about it, they've got something that they're particularly good at, that they're particularly enthused about, and they want to get it out there. And I think that's what we need to be providing in our places. At the moment, retail tends to be driven very much by physical infrastructure that has limited shop fronts and has a certain amount of parking and it has all these sort of things you've got to tick. But at the end of the day, it just becomes a stifler to actually the creativity of getting people out there. Twitter is a massive part of that process, about sort of connecting people directly with a business person or with an individual or with a personality. Airbnb is another example of independent industries that form up to actually to make it, democratize the process. And these tools are becoming more and more common. And there are some tools coming out actually quite soon in Australia, which I can't really talk about because I think it was told in confidence, but in about a week there's this tool coming out that will actually help with neighbourhood connectivity. And it's an Australian product, and it'll be, I think it'll be quite interesting for places like Pittwater. Here's another example of Miss Bowerbird. You know, she has this caravan. It's the kind of thing you'd get at a market. But the sort of consistent branding and the professionalism that is applied is quite remarkable. It's not just your tent at the markets. It's a lot more than that. And it's the kind of thing that doesn't actually even need to be at the markets. It could just be in a space in the street on a Thursday and a Friday. Every so often you swap it out with other people. You know, you don't have to have big events to make these things work. It was mentioned Sydney food trucks this morning. I think Richard was talking about it. And the food trucks is a really interesting idea. And here, it was in the city of Sydney, they applied, you know, they had an app. Everyone has an app. You know, Enliven Pittwater has an app. But it's a very powerful tool because these things are transitional. They move around. You follow their Twitter feed to know where you can go and get the taco or whatever it is. And I think that's becoming, that sort of connectivity is going to become more and more important, but it's also what drives the energy and buzz, which is at the end of the day what you want to do. Here's another example, pop-up brands. Pop-up brands is actually formed by an ex-colleague of ours at Stockland in digital marketing, and it is basically small lease spaces that either retailers or even a cafe has a wall, and they want to lease out the wall to a gallery operator, someone who has some art to sell. So they can put a price on that, and they can lease it out for a week, a month, whatever. So it's these pop-up spaces, and this is a marketplace that you can actually access these spaces. I think, you know, fascinating. And they're looking at, you know, pop-up office as well. You know, you've got a special project. How do I find a place to accommodate 20 people for a 2-month project? And so these sort of fluid and dynamic places, and I guess it's the adaptability, as I said before, is the key to that. Renu Australia, which as I mentioned earlier, you know, we're working with, you know, they've done a lot of work in Newcastle. They're transitioning 100 Street in Newcastle incredibly. And a lot of Renu Australia, their model is, you know, occupying empty spaces on a month-to-month lease. The landowner basically is just saying, okay, here's the empty space. You get $1 a month. As soon as they find a permanent tenant, they can get out, and the permanent tenant can move in. But they've been able to build 145 businesses in Hunter Street off the back of this. And so it's this temporary, it's the sort of temporary nature of this, and being a bit flexible in our approach from a landlord and from a business owner point of view. And Renu Australia are working in Leichhardt now. They're working all over the place, and they're working in Parramatta. In the case of Parramatta, it's not so much filling up spaces, it's about creative industries and about creating a creative culture and the forum for that to happen. And this is Pop-Up Parramatta, you know, which was about bringing artists and giving artists some space and capacity to show their work. And another, getting into more of a physical context, this is, and we've seen chairs in New York already, which I think are brilliant. This is a San Francisco example of pop-up, not pop-up parks, the San Francisco parklets. And the parklets are a brilliant idea in the sense that they're actually more permanent than they look. They're actually initiatives that are run by the local community. San Francisco produced a really brilliant guidebook to help guide the community through the process of getting these approved. Often it's the businesses sacrificing a parking space in front of their shop for something else, but it's seeing as a balance of recognizing, well, actually a lot of my trade is walking, not necessarily driving, you know, and actually the diversity this produces in my neighborhood is actually going to drive more traffic to my business. And a lot of these are quite affordably done and quite quickly turned around. Another example, this is in Coburn in Perth, which is a new, it's an Australand development. They've got, as is often the case, it's hard to get the retail in early in these new developments. You've got to get the residents in there, you've got to get the place built. You know, the retail side's hard to get going. So they built a temporary cafe, and there's actually what's behind us is a playground. They've got table tennis competitions, that kind of stuff. And it's just made with a series of containers and shelters. It'll be there for 4 or 5 years. It provides some basic amenity for the people that live there. And then when it's viable, they can build the broader market and everything else that's needed on a more permanent basis. Incredibly successful. Another example is the work that Co-Design and a lot of the other placemaking companies do this, of just sort of, in a lot of different areas. This one's the School of Life, which is a pop-up. It was a cafe/bookshop. It was there, they had a very low budget. It was there for 4 months. And it you know, drives a massive amount of energy and an incredible engagement opportunity. And we're looking at that certainly from the park spaces that we build in our communities. How can we actually maybe put something in temporarily, get people to test some ideas out, and then build what they actually ultimately want. Likewise with cafes and so forth. It's not new ideas, but ideas that you don't actually see often outside of the CBD. And I think it could be quite easily done, quite affordably done. And especially given that Pittwater has a bit of a seasonal characteristic. It tends to be busier in the summer, obviously people coming up using holiday houses, and less in the winter. And they're the kinds of things that can actually deal with those ebbs and flows and sort of not threaten the existing businesses that actually need to work through the whole thing, or the existing businesses as the way of them leveraging their base into a broader platform during the busier season and being able to come back to the smaller platform during the winter months. So the last bit is placeability. Placeability, at the end of the day, you need to have an incredible sense of the context that you're working in, because ultimately it's the place that drives the genuine character of the retail. In the case of Pittwater, you've obviously got the beaches, you've got the bay, you've got the ridge lines, and you've got these east-west links, which, 3 minutes, great, which are incredibly important and actually tie up quite nicely with each of the village hubs. And the village hubs become the conduit that actually allows you to link both water bodies together and actually become a very gentle way for you to get down from the hills into the villages. So when you actually look at that in the case of Avalon, I would argue that when you start to look at Avalon as a neighbourhood centre, you actually need to be going at 800 metres and seeing how do actually the people within 800 metres get into that centre. It's not good enough to just do a master plan of the neighbourhood centre and look at the intersection and say how we're going to solve that. You've actually got to understand how do those pedestrian links work all the way up, and I would argue even across the top to the Pittwater side. And even more intensely at the 400 metre radius, you've got to look at how you can address these barriers, such as the main road that cuts up north and south. I know it's a challenge, it's a state road. But there are parts of it, what's been done at Newport is absolutely phenomenal. It's tamed the road down, it's brought the character of the beach in with the Norfolk Pines. Those kinds of things are fabulous, and it shows that you can do something with a big road like that. It doesn't have to be a 6-lane arterial everywhere. And in fact, I find it intriguing that it's 1 lane through the bends, but then you come to Avalon and it's a 6-lane arterial again. It's like, why is that? This is the bit where the pedestrians are. RMS challenge and deal with, here you go. And then here's I pity the poor pedestrian, who was me yesterday, has to walk on this. And what if I had a stroller? Now I know there's a main street 100 metres across, but not everybody is on the main street. People should be able to go where they need to go. And also, you need to link the features together and that link across the ridge. Taking advantage of the climate. Here, obviously, the shops do well on this side because it gets the sun in the morning. Shops don't do so well on this side because it doesn't get the sun. Being conscious of that, make sure it's built into what you're doing. Likewise, Monavale, 800 metres out, focus really in the 400 as well. Deal with that barrier, make that sort of acknowledge the features that you've got and how do you actually tie those features in and actually connect yourself back to Pittwater and across to the beach. And here's classic. This roundabout is right in the middle of Monavale. It's just up here on what is a reasonably busy road. But that road, ultimately the destination is Monavale. But yet this is yesterday afternoon. Now I'm trying to cross this street. I'm a mid-40s, late 40s adult. I had trouble. So why is that in the middle? Now I love the tree in the middle, but why is that in the middle of the town centre? So it's unpacking these things and saying, well, look, you know what? Maybe there's a better pedestrian solution that actually solves it. So at the end of the day, it's about livability, adaptability, placeability. It's about surprise and delight. It's about moving beyond stereotypes. It's about bringing these elements together. And now I've just talked about 3, there's many others. You need to drive the energy into the place. All these things will drive the energy. Engages with a larger audience. You need to engage across the spectrum of people and personalities. And you have to be both local and Sydney-wide. Thank you.